You see, when I was 16 years old, my life took an unexpected turn. I was born and raised in what people consider to be a prestigious family. I had everything I could wish for, yet it wasn't the life I wanted. As any teenage girl, I wanted to party, hang out with friends, and find true love. But according to my family rules, I can't date anyone I wanted. And as a stubborn kid, I broke the rules. And to make a long story short, I ended up being pregnant from the love of my life, Owen, or so I thought. Well, my story is not about getting pregnant by mistake. No, though I was 16, I wanted to be a mom. A lot of you might judge me for that, but all I wanted was a child of my own. Plus, it sounded like a great idea to convince my parents to let me live my life as I wanted. However, what I was not expecting was my parents' reaction when they heard the news. They treated me as if I was their enemy. They locked me in my room so that no one would notice my belly bump and threatened my boyfriend to stay away from me. I was devastated, and I cried my eyes out every single day. But my boyfriend promised me that when I turned 18, he'll be waiting for me. We will live at his apartment and he'll take care of us. I spent 9 months locked in my own room, suffering. I tried to break out a couple of times, but it didn't work. My parents brought a private doctor to our house and prepared my room to let me give birth there. They spent a fortune in order to protect their reputation, which apparently is more valuable than their daughter. They were so cruel to me, they didn't even allow me to know the gender of my child. All they said is that I won't be able to see it once it's born because they will, and I quote, get rid of it. I begged them to let me hold it or even see it before they took it away, but they just refused. They were heartless. When it was time to give birth, I saw the doctor's tag and memorized his name. I memorized as many details as possible so that when I find a way out, I'll go and look for my baby. I promised to find and protect my child no matter what. After they took my baby away, I was in a deep depression. I felt like part of me was missing and I just couldn't take it anymore. Each passing day, I hated my parents even more and aspired for the day I'd break free. Years passed and I turned 18. For the passing 2 years, I was planning my escape and saving money. And when the day had come, I left a note to my parents telling them that I'm gone for good. I was heartbroken for how they treated me, so I never looked back. I even wished that they would suffer as much as I did when they took my child away. The first thing I did was go to my boyfriend's house. I was so naive, thinking that he would wait 2 years to be with me. I caught him living with another woman that claimed to be his girlfriend. When he saw me that day, he was in a huge shock. He told me that he had lost hope and never expected to see me again. I asked him about the baby, but he had no clue. He said that he tried to search for it, but he had nothing to direct him. So he just had to give up and start over. I was surprised by him. I mean, this is his child. How could he just give up and start over as if nothing happened? I was heartbroken, yet I guess he's right. If you look at the situation from his point of view, he might be right. My parents were too strict towards him, threatened him a couple of times, and he hadn't any piece of information about our child. Plus, he was kind and promised to help me look for our baby. He cooked me some dinner and we talked. I gave him all the information I had and he assured me that he'll find our baby. Once we were done and I was about to leave, he asked me if I had anywhere else to go. I replied, no, but it's okay, I can rent a room at a motel or something. However, Owen was a good guy and offered me to stay for a while at his apartment. Honestly, I couldn't say no because this was part of my plan from the beginning. His girlfriend was mad. I could tell from the look she had on her face. Yet I didn't care. I am the mother of his child and I have a right to stay at his place more than she does. But what I didn't expect was what happened next. As I was unpacking my stuff, I heard their voices, kissing. I mean, I know I'm the outsider in this house, yet I expected a little respect for being the mother of his child. The next day, when Owen's girlfriend left for work, he came to my room and apologized for what had happened. He explained that it was hard for her to accept what he'd done for me and she wanted to prove to me that he's hers. I appreciated his apology and actually felt kind of bad for him. I mean, he is facing a heart issue. After our conversation, we looked up the doctor's name and found the name of the hospital he works for. When I arrived there, I was shaking. And when I saw the doctor, the whole thing flashed back to my memory, and I could hear my baby's voice crying. I had a breakdown and I started sobbing. Owen held me in his arms and the doctors rushed to help me. After that incident, I was finally calm and able to speak to the doctor. However, he refused to tell me anything. He just asked me to leave and never return. But I couldn't give up on my baby, so I came back the next day and looked for him. But to my surprise, there were huge guards that dragged me to a black car outside of the hospital. No one even dared to help me. They drove for what seemed like an hour until we arrived at an abandoned house in the middle of the woods. But what made my jaw drop was when I saw my father standing in front of me. He was the one who did this to me. I couldn't believe a normal person would do such a thing to his daughter, but that was just not enough for him. It's not enough that he didn't apologize or anything. He gave me a plane ticket and some money and said, "You are a disgrace to our family. Just leave and start a new life away from us." That is just unbelievable. What a cruel father. He continued saying that I should just disappear and never try to come back or look for my child again, or else. I was helpless and powerless, so I just had to obey. The whole thing just ended there, and my life took another direction. I went abroad and started a new life. You might be shocked, but 16 years have passed since that day, and I spend my entire life in a foreign country away from everyone, but I can assure you that I haven't forgotten about my kid this whole time. After those years, I finally managed to get back to my country because I had to attend my father's funeral. Yes, the heartless man had died, and I was finally kind of free. When I arrived home, I couldn't feel pity for my mother, though she was broken and needed her daughter. Yet I just couldn't. She agreed to my father's cruelness and tortured me for the past 18 years. From the day they locked me inside my room till this day, I promised myself not to forgive either of them. My mother tried to talk to me every single day, but I just kept on refusing until the day she said, "Rose, I named her Rose after your grandmother. She's as beautiful as you, and she was sent to an orphanage." My heart almost stopped when I heard those words. She gave me some papers and the address to that orphanage. She asked me if we could talk for a bit, but I just refused. I told her that I appreciate her help, but that is not enough to fix what she had broken inside of me. As I was leaving, I saw her shedding some tears. Though I felt bad, I was too angry to just forgive her. So I headed to the orphanage as fast as possible. When I arrived there, I was trembling and shaking. I was terrified and started wondering how Rose would react when I finally tell her that I'm her biological mother. However, as I expected, she wasn't there. I mean, she's 18 years old, and probably she'd been adopted or left to live on her own. But what they told me there made me at the edge of collapsing. My poor daughter had been transferred into a couple of foster homes, and 5 years ago, she was last adopted by a grown-up couple who lived in the countryside. After proving that I'm her biological mother, the lady approved of giving me her new address. I was overjoyed and relieved. I'm finally going to meet my daughter after all these years. When I arrived at her foster parents' house, I felt something weird. Suddenly, I had a pain in my stomach and I had trouble breathing. I pulled my car next to their house and noticed that I'm sweating. I guess after all, I'm too nervous to meet my daughter for the first time. I walked towards the door, shivering, and when I knocked, a weird-looking man in his 30s opened it. I immediately asked him about Rose, and to my surprise, he was shocked. He tried to pretend that he never heard of her. I knew he was lying, therefore I offered him money, and it worked. After all, no one can say no to Benjamin Franklin. That man said that she used to live at this house with his aunt, and when she died, Rose refused to stay with him, so she went to live on her own. I was heartbroken and immediately started to cry. My poor daughter, she must have suffered a lot in her life. With my red eyes and puffy nose, I went around asking for her until I found out the whole ugly truth. My poor daughter was in jail. I couldn't forgive myself or my parents after hearing her story. I was told the man who lived in the house was mean to her. He tried to harm her and left her without food or money. He used to let her sleep outside sometimes if she didn't bring enough money from begging. He used her as a beggar, and one time she had to steal because she had nothing to give him and was afraid to face him. But that day she was caught and sent to jail. After hearing what happened to my poor child, I wanted to smash his face into the ground. I wanted to get back to his place and let him wish he was never born. However, I decided to think rationally and reasonably and let justice decide his destiny. After a long, hard day, I went to the jail looking for Rose, and when I finally found her, I burst into tears like a baby. I asked for permission to meet her, yet the police officer apologized and said, "Ma'am, your daughter refused to accept your visit. She said she doesn't want to see you." At that moment, my whole world collapsed. I suddenly realized I was too busy looking for her. I didn't think about her feelings. All I cared about was myself and how bad I wanted to find her. However, I never thought about how she might feel or if she even knows about my existence. I guess she thought that I gave her up. Yet at the same time, she has to know the truth. I won't surrender just like that after what I've been through. Therefore, I kept trying to visit her every single day for the last couple of months, but she kept on refusing. I felt helpless and almost gave up. But then an idea popped into my head. You might think I'm stupid or mentally ill for what I did next. Well, let me just tell you. Yes, it was. But at the same time, I was desperate to see my daughter, and therefore I decided to join her. Yes, join her in prison. I planned on doing something that might get me the least jail sentence. However, it turned into something unexpected. I messed the whole thing up and ended with a 20-year sentence. I was devastated. I mean, I know what I did was wrong, but it was not on purpose. I just ended up ruining my life and the chance of having a normal life with Rose. But on the bright side, I was finally able to see my daughter. Though it's been like 18 years, and I was not able to watch her first steps and blow out candles for her birthday, I felt satisfied seeing her in front of me. I tried to approach her a couple of times, and when we finally got to talk, I explained everything to her. It was a big burden for her to carry, but I just couldn't wait to spend another minute without her. Days passed, and as I was trying to build a relationship with my daughter, I got notified that a family member is here to visit me. It was my mom. I was bursting with fury and blamed her and my dad for what happened to me and my daughter. But when I was about to refuse her visit, I remembered myself, how desperate I was to meet my daughter. I suddenly noticed that she's been trying to do the same thing with me. She was trying to explain to me that my father is the one that forced her to do what she'd done. I felt like my daughter was treating me like how I treated my mother. I kept on blaming her for something she was forced to do. Therefore, I accepted her visit. When she saw me, she burst into tears and hugged me tight. We sat and talked as I expected. My father was behind everything, and he threatened her as well. But to my surprise, she said that she tried to approach Owen a couple of times and he just ignored her. I was mad at him at first, but I guess after all, he's either scared or acting like a jerk. In either case, I didn't want him in my life again. After our conversation, my mother asked to meet my daughter as well, and to my surprise, Rose agreed. When the three of us sat and talked, we almost cried our eyes out. Yet we agreed that from now on, our future would be different, and we will live our happily ever after. However, the biggest problem was that I had to serve 20 years. But then my mom said she hired a good lawyer for my case and he ordered an appeal. I was super excited. My mother's words brought joy to my ears, and I just wished that it would work and we'd finally be able to live as we wanted. Fortunately, it worked, and I had to serve a much lower sentence. I spent a year with my daughter until she was finally free. We spent a lot of time together, and we were lucky enough to become cellmates.